Welcome to Optimal Game State. Today we're going to look at the background for Warhammer Fantasy, and specifically for the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game. Now, while I do occasionally touch on role-playing games, that isn't really the focus of the channel, but since I'm about to start into the Enemy Within campaign as a player for the second time, I thought it would be nice to put together some intro videos to help people get started. Normal service will resume shortly. In this video, I'll take you through the background of the Warhammer setting, so you'll have a decent understanding of what your character would know of the world if you're playing this game. If you've no interest in role-playing, hopefully this video will give you a decent overview of the setting and will be of some use. First, a little bit of history for context. Games Workshop was founded in 1975 as a wooden board game company. The foundational moment for the company was when they got distribution rights for Dungeons & Dragons in Europe. As part of that, they produced a line of miniatures. To give people a reason to keep picking up miniatures, they produced Warhammer Fantasy Battles in 83, which initially was quite generic, but slowly developed more character, and in 86 we got Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. The goal here was to create a setting which was distinct to that of D&D. The team were a mix lot. They had some ex-TSR staff, they had history majors, archaeologists, and of course a mix of role players and wargamers. Over numerous contributions, the setting organically developed into the one we have now. The developers at the time were heavily influenced by Call of Cthulhu, so this game does have a darker feel to it. Rather than starting out as heroes of the realm, you typically play normal folk, like the infamous Ratcatcher, and the stories often involve uncovering a nefarious cult. There were also a lot of cultural influences, giving a British spin on the US idea of D&D. This was during the Thatcher years, a period of increased inequality and social division, and the writers for the most part came from liberal working class backgrounds. So the setting does have elements of this, with the nobility in the Empire often appearing as incompetent or as decadent chaos worshippers. The setting itself took inspiration from other British influences, such as 2000 AD, and notably Michael Moorcock, whose take on chaos clearly is the inspiration for chaos in Warhammer. All of this combines to give Warhammer a grittier and morally grey setting when compared to the heroics of the classic D&D. Broadly, the wider world of Warhammer is essentially just a map of our world, but coloured in with fantasy elements. In some cases, these have been well detailed, like the Lizardman-controlled Lustria, which would be our South America. But in other places, like the Southlands of Africa or Cathay of China, we have only loose sketches and rumours of what's out there. Obviously, a lot of things change between our world and this, but it does mean we have a rough idea what the local flora and fauna might be like, along with typical weather. On the island of Albion, for example, the Britain of the setting, it constantly rains. For our story, the core part of the world is the Empire. This is roughly the equivalent of Germany in Europe. It's based on the historical Holy Roman Empire from the 16th and 17th centuries. Now, that's not going to mean a lot to most people, so here are some of the key elements. The Empire is a collection of provinces and towns, each with their own rulers, who have all sworn allegiance to Emperor Karl Franz in Altdorf. There is always politicking and tensions, and the Empire is always on the brink of a schism. Currently, there is some tension between the province of Reichland, where you can find the capital city of Altdorf, and the northern province of Middenland, which has the city of Mittenheim. In addition to political differences, there are also cultural and religious differences, as the folk up north have a more Nordic vibe and worship the god Ulrich rather than the Reichland god of Sigmar. The Empire armies are based around the pike and shot idea. So we have ranks of pikemen to hold back the cavalry, we have cannons, we have muskets to shoot up the infantry. Now, this is a time of changing military strategy, so you still have plenty of places for knights and swords mixed in with all that, of course. As this is a fantasy setting, we also have wizards. Now, in this setting, magic is dangerous. Rogue wizards are likely to be evil necromancers or insane chaos worshippers. The Empire does have colleges for wizards where they can be safely trained, but sensible folk know not to trust any wizard. You never know what's going inside their head. Because of this danger, the Empire has witch hunters who root out evil magic users. That said, when an Empire commander is facing off against an enemy army, having a wizard who can cast Fireball is always welcome. Along with the wizards, there are also divine powers, usually wielded by priests who are blessed by their patron god. Not only does the Empire acknowledge a pantheon of gods, so multiple gods and goddesses, But each race also has their own gods. Out of the human pantheon, some gods of note are Sigmar, the god of mankind and the founder of the empire, Ulrich, the god of winter, Shalia, the goddess of healing, and Mor, the god of death. There are, of course, many more. Ulrich and Sigmar are notable as Ulrich is one of the old gods and was the one who taught humanity to hunt, fight, and survive. His symbol is that of the wolf. Sigmar, on the other hand, was born a man. He brought the tribes of man together and founded the empire, after which he ascended to godhood. His symbols are the twin-tailed comet and the hammer. So that tension between Middenheim and Altdorf that we talked about earlier also has this religious element. Altdorf considers Sigmar to be head of the pantheon, while Middenheim would give that honour to Ulrich. Of course, there never was any enmity between Ulrich and Sigmar. Ulrich was there to help Sigmar to ascend, and together they fight the real enemy, the four gods of chaos, which any right-thinking person does not name. While the Empire is primarily human, there are also a number of non-human species who live side by side. The halflings are commonly found across the Empire. They are short, like human children, when fully grown, with round, hairless faces. Halflings are renowned for their skill at cooking, and an inn with a halfling cook is one worth visiting. Their homeland is called Mootland and is a minor province within the Empire. Dwarves, on the other hand, have their own land in the World's Edge Mountains, but dwarves native to the Empire are also common and are known as Imperial Dwarves. Long has there been an allegiance between the Empire and the dwarves. Many of the foundations of the human cities were built by dwarven hands. They're short like halflings, but noticeably stout and sport impressive beards. The female dwarfs do not have those beards, but do braid their hair in much the same way the men braid their beards. Dwarfs are known to be loyal and stubborn. Once their word is given, they will not break it. They are renowned miners, smiths, engineers, and craftsmen. Two gods of note in the dwarven pantheon, as they are often involved in curses, are Grungni, the god of smiths, and Grimnir, the god of war. Another ally the humans might encounter are the elves. These come in two main varieties for this discussion, the high elves and the wood elves. The high elves come from the island nation called Ulthuan. The wood elves, on the other hand, come from the wooded realms close to or next to the empire. They're all tall and slender with pointed ears and a graceful, if alien, appearance. Although often wise, they can be arrogant and have a tendency to look down on the other races. For the average human, the difference between a high elf and a wood elf won't really mean much, but the two cultures diverged around 3,000 years ago and are now very, very different in outlook. The high elves are much more bound by discipline and ritual and see themselves as a powerful global power that must use their mastery of magic to alter the world. The wood elves, on the other hand, are isolationist. They are not concerned with the greater world and only with their woodland realms. Their culture is much less structured than high elves and is focused on living along with nature rather than mastering it. The wood elves in the empire are likely to be hunters and scouts who've been sent by seers to deal with a potential threat to their woodland realm. There are also a few lesser known species within the empire, such as the ogres and gnomes, but we can leave those to the side for the time being. The borders of what is known as the Old World mirror that of Europe. So there is an ocean to the west, mountains to the east, a sea to the south, and ice to the north. So to the east of the empire, and within the Old World, we have Bretonnia, which is the equivalent of France. Bretonnia has an Arthurian style about it, with questing knights and ladies of the lake. South of that, there is Estalia and Tylea. So Estalia is the version of Spain, and Tylea is the version of Italy. To the north of the empire is Kislev, which is teamed around the Rus, and that has Cossacks and Polish hussars. But perhaps of more interest are the hostile nations. To the far north, we have Norska and the Chaos Hordes, tribes sworn to chaos demons who muster their forces for the next big attack on the empire. The further north one goes, the worse it gets. This is ever a threat, and Kislev has a lonely vigil against the forces of chaos. Many within the empire believe there's nothing to worry about. The forces of chaos were pushed back and broken in the last great war against them. It's not uncommon, however, to see doomsayers on the street. Folks who say they've seen the signs of the end to come and the rot within the empire that will leave it weak, for when the attack finally comes. To the south of the Empire are the Border Princes. At one point, this area was just all orcs and goblins, but over the last few hundred years, human settlers have managed to make something for themselves. Mostly, though, they're just outlaws and criminals, but if they keep the Greenskins busy, all the better. This is an area of constant conflict, not just between the settlers and the orcs, but also between the various human factions themselves trying to make their mark. The Greenskins can also be found in the World's Edge Mountains to the east. Although the dwarves do their best to keep them in check, they tend to focus on their own mountain holes. Beyond those mountains, there's not that much. To the best of your knowledge, it's just a barren wasteland full of greenskins. You have also heard rumors of undead armies, giants, evil elves, and even armies of giant lizards. It's really hard to know what's true or false out there, but one thing you do know for certain: you're better off within the Empire than outside it. Now, while the enemies and the borders of the Empire are a constant concern, the ones within the Empire are potentially a bigger problem. For a start, the Empire is primarily covered in forests. Villages and towns will have areas cleared around them, and roads will lead between the cities and towns. But stray off those paths and you're into deep forest. In those forests, you can find greenskin tribes, chaos cults, packs of beastskins, and Sigmar knows what else. The Beastmen were once men, but due to a moral weakness or corruption, they were altered by chaos. If not found out, these mutants flee to the forest and join warbands who prey on travelers. At first, these mutations might be something small, like a patch of scaled skin, but over time, these mutations will grow more pronounced, giving the mutant features of a beast, like a goat or a rat. The lesson here is to not stray into the woods, and even the roadways and rivers can be dangerous, and they have patrols to keep them as safe as possible. The peasant folk of the Empire are not serfs, but the world is not safe out there, so they tend to stay to what they know and rarely leave their home village. In the larger towns, though, things are a little bit different. The merchant class has emerged and formed into guilds. They now have some actual power, and while the nobility may still look down on them, they have to make some concessions to the merchants to get what they want. Life for the average citizen is similar to that of people from the late medieval or early Renaissance periods of our own history. Food for the common people is typically bread, porridge, and stews, while the nobility have the fancier fare imported from abroad. The common gathering place for folk will be the tavern, while the wealthy in cities can enjoy events like the opera. Religious festivals are common and bring everyone in each community together. With the recent arrival of the printing press, there are now some broadsheets and books. Felix Jaeger from the Gottrick of Felix series, for example, had a series of his adventures released in print books. Literacy is improving, however, it does remain quite poor, especially outside of the cities. It is a hard life, but most feel it is better than it was for previous generations, and the Empire is in a period of relative peace. In the Cubicle 7 version of the Warhammer roleplay game, the default way to play is with characters from the Empire, so the game is very Eurocentric. In contrast to the typical Dungeons & Dragons adventure, your heroes are likely to be a pretty diverse group, and it's not unusual to have characters who aren't very good at combat at all. While those dangers are there, you'll sometimes find yourself better off to have a bowman, a grave robber, or a lawyer in the group than it might be to have a wizard or a soldier. While combat certainly plays a significant part in WFRP, you'll also have a lot of investigation and social interaction to do, so keep that in mind. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the basics of the mechanics in WFRP. So how to pass a skill, how to swing a sword, and so on. Then with that knowledge, we'll have one last video looking at character generation and some of the considerations you should make while putting your character together. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week, I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.